Good afternoon to all my listeners, and welcome to Men, Family, and Education Under Fire. I'm your host, Dr. Horace Williams, and I have a special guest with me today on this show. We have a very, very hot topic that we're going to be discussing today. Our discussion is going to be the state of urban education. And with me today is a good friend of mine and a colleague. His name is Mr. Tyrone Winfrey. And Mr. Winfrey, thank you for being on the show today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm excited, Dr. Williams. I'm just excited to be here today.
Yes, sir. I've been talking about having you on the show. It's so many things that we're going to discuss, but today's topic is going to be the state of urban education. Now, before we get started, a couple things I always like to put out there about this show is, number one, we're not placing blame, but we're taking more responsibility. Not placing blame, but taking more responsibility. Now, for all my listeners out here, I'm going to give you a little background of my special guest today because this topic is true and dear to his heart, and he is more than qualified to have this discussion with us today. Number one, he has worked in juvenile probation as a counselor. Mm-hmm. He's also worked for the state of Michigan in youth development. He's worked for the University of Michigan as the director of admissions, and I was with him before I really got to know him, and I saw him in action getting young folk into the University of Michigan, getting urban kids. Mm-hmm. He's also worked on the Detroit Education School Board, that's the DPS School Board, as president. Mm-hmm. He's also worked with the Education Achievement Authority as the chief of staff. So he is more than qualified to have this discussion with us today. So, Mr. Winfrey, thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for allowing me to be here. And if I could just correct you on one thing. So the state of Michigan was Michigan State University. And my background stretches about 30 plus years in working with young people in the city of Detroit, Wayne County, and pretty much the state of Michigan, and also to some degree across the nation. And when you said juvenile probation, I worked for what is called the State Ward Diversion Program, back in the day. It was part of the CITSIP, Comprehensive Youth Training Community Involvement Program, which was a subsidiary of New Detroit, then Michigan State University, the University of Michigan, the school board, and then recently the EAA, the Education Achievement Authority of Michigan, which was the state school district. So I've been doing a lot of things working with young people.
Absolutely. So in short, you are familiar with young folks in an urban and inner city environment as it relates to education.
Yes,
and
correct.
not only that, but you have some skill sets on the next level, college.
That's true. You know, the thing is, growing up here in Detroit, went to Cass Tech High School, and I was fortunate to go out to the University of Wyoming. And a lot of people say, how did you get out to Wyoming from Detroit? Well, part of it was football, and I was on the team for a while. Okay. But I found out my life's purpose when I went out there. And I'm always talking to young people. People say, I want to get a job, I want a career, and that's great. But the main thing is to find out what your purpose is. And God spoke to me out there in Wyoming, my purpose, came back to Detroit, worked on my graduate degree at Wayne State University. And then, in the midst of that, those positions we talked about. And so I love working with young people. And I've seen them from one end, the juvenile probation. I work with young men, and when I say young men, because that's always on my caseload, we had young men. And these young men in the late 80s were selling crack cocaine on the streets of Detroit, to working with high achievers at the University of Michigan, going on to not only U of M, but Ivy League schools for graduate school and you name it or whatever. So I've seen young people from one end to the other. And the key thing is about that's my purpose, but also the key thing, the difference I've seen with young people is not sometimes single female-headed household, poverty and all those things. Yeah, that may be some of the factors, but the key thing is exposure. If I expose a young person a certain way, I'm going to raise or lower their expectations. And those expectations lead to education, which leads to employment or entrepreneurship, which eventually leads to their economics and life. All those E's all relate to each other.
Oh, that's beautiful. And that's a great segue into our discussion, which is going to be the state of urban education. Mm-hmm. So with that being said, with that background information, I'm going to ask you this question. Mm-hmm. Where do you think, or where have we come from with education? I'm just going to say in the last 2 decades. So In your mind, because you've worked with these young folks, where have we come from? Give me some examples of the state of education when you start helping young folks to achieve that dream of going to college or just finishing high school.
Well, the key thing that I see here in the city of Detroit is that, over the last 2 decades, going back to, let's say, 2000 or so, or the late 90s, our school systems have changed dramatically.
Okay.
We went to pretty much everybody in the city of Detroit going to DPS or Detroit Public Schools or maybe Catholic schools, to now you have a lot of charter schools. You have a lot of students that are going across 8 Mile or going across Alter Road or whatever, going to different schools. And parents are looking for 2 main things that I've seen, Dr. Williams.
Okay.
One is education and the other is safety. And sometimes in Detroit, we've seen schools where parents don't feel their kids are safe. Okay. And they feel that they're not getting educated properly, so they vote with their feet and they leave the district. But the main thing that I see that I think education has changed, we've gotten smaller in the city of Detroit so far as our public schools, but at the same time, we have to keep the academic achievement at high levels. And that goes back to the teaching and the learning.
Okay.
And I think we got some great teachers, but then also the learning is an issue. And it's not that our children can't learn. I will never say that these young African American or Native American or Hispanic American or white American, or whatever race or whatever ethnicity they are, I will never say they can't learn. It's just that now our young people face so many different factors that impede or impact their learning, from social media to what's happening in the home to what's happening in the community. All those things affect them.
Let's talk about that. You bring up that point, and I wanted, because I've talked about this on other shows, and I think that our listeners need to understand how important that family, the family piece to a child's education is. And I know you and I have sit in rooms where we've done hearings with students, right? And some of the things that we talk about or we discuss with the student and their family is what's going on at the home.
Absolutely.
And give me some examples, from your experience where we talked about with a certain student, and you don't have to mention their names, where that home environment affects the way they learn, affects the way they handle their school lesson. And then we can talk about the social media piece, because that social media bullying is real. Right.
Well, when you say family, and this is how God has blessed me, again, to see young people from one end to the other. And so when I work with young people that were going on to Michigan State University or University of Michigan, a lot of times I sat down with families. Families were in tune to the education process. They were working with the students on the application. They were working with them on scholarships. They helped their children have goals and so forth. Then on the other end, when I worked with the juvenile probation students back in the day, and then recently working with them at hearings with the EAA, you see families sometimes where the student is in charge, and you do a student disciplinary hearing where the student is telling the mother or the father what's going on. And family is so important. And not to say that I was the best parent, but one thing about being a parent, you got to be a parent.
You got to be a parent,
24/7. Right. And I had some high expectations for my own children, and sometimes they got mad at me. Sometimes they were upset. But the thing is, when I look at where they are today, and whether they thank me a lot or not, my main thing is I have to be the parent. And so what I see with our parents, whether families, whether the students are high achievers or not, they have to basically be the parents to them. And set the ground rules, set the expectations, and set the foundation. Because the children, and you heard me say this all the time, and when I see a 15-year-old, I don't see them at 15. I'm looking already down the line 10 years from now.
Absolutely.
I saw a young man today who was 21, and he hadn't finished college. I said, I don't want to see you at 31 and you saying the same thing. Because it's coming. You never go back to 11, but you will see 31. So my key thing is when we met with those 15 and 16-year-olds and so forth, is to how we can help them work toward their goals and their dreams and so forth. And that's what families need to work in conjunction with the school system, not to be antagonistic, not to be upset with the teachers and all this stuff.
Correct.
But how can they work together? But our young people sometimes that I've seen recently, they're so angry, they're so bitter, and I see so much just lack of hope and lack of purpose. And you're thinking, if I could just put something in that child to say, you know what, 5, 10 years from now, we want you to be able to do something. And again, I saw this with the parents who are helping them go to college, but sometimes I don't see it with the other parents. So I'm saying, how can we get all families together to do those kind of things? How
can we get them all together? And that's a great point. And Tyrone, you've hit on some key areas that we talk about on this show. But let's look at another thing from a higher institutional perspective. And I've worked in schools here probably for the last 15 years. And as of recent, I ask myself this question, a couple things to help students gain, or what I like to say, create value for education.
Ooh.
So one of the things I see from an institutional, why do you think that the schools have taken away, besides budget, taken away the arts, creative arts from the school? How has that affected some of our
children? A lot of times we talk about it being the budget, but three things outside. Okay, we know we have to have a standard academic curricula to help them go on to college or career, skill trades or whatever. And that curricula should consist of the mathematics, the science, the social science, the foreign language, and English. When I was at the University of Michigan, those were the 5 core areas we looked at when a child submitted their transcript. I've seen thousands of transcripts. Those 5 classes are important. Those are important so far as the student achieving well, showing how intelligent the student is or what the aptitude of the student is or whatever. But you're absolutely right. You also need to supplement that with art, with music, and with athletics. You have to. Students need to be well-rounded. And so we put this thing, we keep saying it's the budget, but there's no way we should have schools that don't have at least art, music, and some form of athletics, because there's a school out in the suburbs, I can mention their name if you want, but they basically look at sound mind, sound body. And it's a private school. And when you go to this high school, not only do you have to, participate in all the rigor of the academics, but a student has to play at least 3 sports, And if they don't play sports, if they get some kind of doctor's excuse, they have to be on chess or something. And because that's how they roll. And I'm saying, wow, look at that model. They're telling them, yes, we want you to be smart. Yes, we want you to achieve so far as your cognitive skills, but we also want you to have athletic or sports skills, because your body is important. The same thing, your body is important, music is important, art is important.
Absolutely.
So there's no way schools should exist without those 3. And it's been devastating to work in schools that we didn't have all 3.
Absolutely. And in my perspective, I concur and I agree with you that students also need an additional outlet from the academics.
Yes.
And especially in a town like Detroit, where we are more music and more talent oriented.
Man, come on.
I'm thinking that giving a student a music class or exposing them to music not only helps them as a student, but helps them as a person.
Absolutely.
It helps them understand some of their background. But with that being said, let's talk about, you mentioned something that was important to me. About the school that was in the suburbs, and they had put forth these 3, I'm going to say criteriums, right?
Right.
So were they successful?
Absolutely. If I may say, Detroit Country Day.
Okay.
They basically are saying, when you come to our school, you have to, the rigor of the academics is going to be there, but you have to participate in some form of athleticism, which I think is extremely important. And now couple that with looking at the University of Michigan. When we admitted students, we looked at those 5 core critical areas that I talked about: math, science, social studies, foreign language, and English. We also looked at the strength of the curriculum to see if the student had advanced classes or AP or advanced placement or international baccalaureate classes, which is IB. But we also looked at their ACT or the SAT scores. But then again, we looked at what type of leadership activities had they been involved in. We wanted to see them have been involved in sports. We wanted to see them involved in music or art or something like that, because we felt it was critical to have a well-rounded student. So that's what, when we look at the urban schools, again, I don't know if it's the money situation. That's what I always hear, is the budget.
Okay,
even when I was on the school board, it was a budget.
It's always the budget.
But the thing is, we need to make sure our students are well-rounded and not just grow up just being great mathematicians. We want you to do that. We want you to be smart in the sciences and all that. But we need to also focus in on your art skills, your music. Do you know that I think there's some research out there that says that students that are performing music do better in mathematics because of the correlation there?
Yes.
Think about that. So
absolutely.
Right. So, and then so far as athleticism, we need to have our students more involved in making sure they feel good about themselves so far as participating in sports, that helps. I mean, when I played football at Cass, I felt so good. I felt leadership. I felt physical. And in fact, I didn't have time to go home and commit crimes and so forth because I'm at practice so much. Right. So those kind of things. So when you think about sports and art and music, they help not only with you shaping yourself to be well-rounded, but they also help you not to get involved in other stuff. Also, Dr. Williams, think about it. When we have done hearings at schools about discipline, and we say to the student, well, what are you doing tonight? Nothing. What are you doing this weekend? Nothing. There's no way. And again, I have to bring my parenting in. We kept our students so busy. Saturdays, we was like gone all day, from police athletic, Detroit Police Athletic football, PAL cheerleading, swimming at the YMCA, karate, music. We always had something to do. Even in the summer, you get 2 or 3 weeks off. After that, you're going to be on somebody's college campus in a pre-college program or something.
Absolutely.
So students need to be involved in things. That helps with the whole education system. And I put this back on the parents and family. A lot of times we say the schools need to do this. The schools do what they can, but at the same time, we need to do more to supplement our child's education, their extracurricular activities, so when they come to the school, they'll be ready to learn.
Absolutely. And again, I agree with you. I know when I was growing up, my mother used to say, idle mind is a devil's workshop.
There you go.
The devil's show ain't gonna be working with you today.
Right. We had to stay busy. Not only did we involved in I was on a baseball team, I was on this team, I was on that, but also during the day I was out riding my bike. I was always staying busy, and energy, and you felt good about yourself. And so now, and I know a lot of times we say back in the day we used to do this. We're never going to go back to those days. I got that.
Got it.
But at the same time, we can still do some things today to help supplement our children in their learning. And I think physical activity and art and music are things that will help do that.
And absolutely. And so that all ties into the state of urban education.
Yes.
Because this topic, we're dealing with how education currently affects our students. And to my listeners out there, we talk to you a great deal about the importance of having family support. It's important for us taking more responsibility. But today the discussion is just I'm going to say a brief one on where our children are in the urban settings, because the urban setting or the inner school or inner city school system is a little different for our kids. So they face a lot of challenges. And again, as we know, students face challenges from, let's talk about the social media piece.
Ooh, yes.
How big is that? So I've talked about this on the air before. How important, how many times have we heard that disagreements start on the weekend on Twitter, on Facebook, on Kick, on Instagram? What can our listeners do as parents to help our children get through that piece and stay out of that type of beef?
Well, and as I answer that question, when I think about a gentleman named Mark Zuckerberg who started Facebook,
yes,
I mean he is a billionaire.
He's a billionaire now.
Billionaire. Had an idea to connect folks together. When I think about the person that started Snapchat, and I apologize I don't have his name, or the person that started Instagram or Twitter, all these folks are now billionaires. And when I think about our children are smart, and they could have done some of those things. Now, they participate on Twitter and all that, but think about it. They had that idea to start something like that themselves, how far ahead they were. But what I've seen with Snapchat and Twitter and Kick and Facebook and all that, how our students engage in sometimes maladaptive behaviors, as I say, so far as, getting on each other or whatever. They fight online, so to speak, and then they have the real fight at the school. And then eventually they take that fight, may put it on YouTube, and then eventually fight some more or whatever. I don't think Facebook and Instagram and all that were actually designed to do all that, but we've used it in a negative way. So I feel that our parents need to take greater hold as to what their children are doing. Not to say they got to be investigative parents and all that. I know I had 3 children. Sometimes they want to go in their room, just close the door and do their thing or whatever.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, I still got to be a parent. Every so often, I got to check and see what's going on.
What's going on.
What's going on with them. So sometimes parents need to get involved. And then sometimes, and I must say it, sometimes, Dr. Williams, I've seen where parents get involved in the mess as well. And so now the student doesn't have a line of demarcation to say, wait a minute, if my mother or father's involved in this mess and I'm involved in it, it's all right. We got to be parents and actually at some point say that, you know what, this is not, as we've said to parents before, they need to stay off Facebook. We need we said that.
We have suggested that to some parents.
So Dr. Williams and I, we've done discipline hearings for the Education Achievement Authority, which ended on June 30th. We could talk. I don't know how many shows about the things that we've seen and heard at them discipline hearings at your high school, Henry Ford High School, based off of just social media. And the thing is, if you take social media in its great form and use it is the way it's supposed to be, our children would be better off. And the same thing, not only just social media, but also smartphones. We use them in so much negative ways.
Absolutely.
But there's so much you can learn. You can look up almost anything on a smartphone. Anything. Wikipedia and all that. I say, one day I was trying to look up how the definition of one word and looked it up, and basically there's a dictionary right there. The thesaurus is actually there as well. I mean, those kind of things could be utilized so much for our children's learning, but we've taken it in the wrong way.
Absolutely. And so that gets us back to this topic, the state of urban education.
Yes.
And what I see, Tyrone, and I've observed this up close, is that our student or this student doesn't seem, and this is not everybody, this is not a general statement, just for what I've observed in environments I've worked, they don't value education to that degree where I think they should. Why do you think that? Why is the value there?
I am trying to develop the answer to that because when I read about, and I love history, and we've talked about it.
Absolutely.
When I go back to 1957, I believe, and look at the Little Rock Nine, who wanted to go to school in Little Rock, Arkansas, at Central High School.
Right now.
And basically federal troops had to help those 9 black children go to school while the whites and others were basically mocking them and putting them down and so forth. When I think about James Meredith, who went to the University of Mississippi and they did not want to allow him to come to school there, and eventually he was admitted. When I think about Booker T. Washington, Booker T. Washington was a slave. He was born in West Virginia. Eventually, when slavery ended, his family, by that time, they had moved to Virginia, and he was working in the salt mines and all that as a young boy. And prior to that, when he was a slave, his mother worked in the big house. I mean, they had a little hut he lived in. He had a bed of rags every night he went to. He didn't even have a bed. When slavery was abolished, eventually he said, you know what, I want education. He worked during the day, slept on the roads at night to get to Hampton Institute. When he got there, when you read his history, he had 2 quarters, 50 cents in his pocket, and basically was told he couldn't go to school there because he hadn't done all the stuff he's supposed to do to get admitted. He asked the person, you know what? He said, well, you know what? I got to go back home. I go back to my posse, my boys, whatever. He said, no, what can I do? Because he valued education. He asked a lady named Mrs. Mackey, what can I do? She said, boy, you can clean this classroom. He cleaned the classroom so great 3 times. The story goes, when you read his history, they allowed him to come to school there. Eventually, he went from there to becoming one of the great orators and speakers and helped build Tuskegee University, and you go on and on about what he's done. They valued education. I don't know where we lost that, Dr. Williams, when we don't value it like our predecessors. And they didn't have, talking about smartphones and Twitter and Facebook, they had none of that stuff.
None of that.
And they valued education.
None of that.
And now we're saying, you know what, we'll go, we may go to school, we may not, whatever. I don't get it, and I'm trying to find out why that is going on so far as a lack of value.
Yeah, and I agree, Tyrone, we have to do something. But to my listeners, if you're just tuning in, this is Men, Family, and Education Under Fire. We're on the Go Radio, and I'm your host, Dr. Horace Williams, and I have a special guest with me today, Mr. Tyrone Winfrey, and we're having a discussion related to the state of urban education. Now, we've had a discussion a little bit about the history, and I'm puzzled in some sense because, again, with the smartphones, as you said, I often ask children, why are you walking around with a smartphone and acting so dumb? And the key, I didn't call them dumb. I said, you're acting dumb.
Right.
When you can pick that phone up and say,
up.
okay, Google or Siri,
right.
You can ask them any question
Absolutely.
that you want, and we don't do that. But one of the things I want to say, Tyrone, as I've observed, and you tell me this, what should the parents be requesting that these institutions do for their children. We know that we have children coming, say, from middle school to high school with the inability to read on the proper grade level. How can we change just the reading? What can we do to change that?
That's a good point. And you're asking what the parents should do with the school. So first of all, I think the parents should be involved in the school, more involved. Not to say to go up to the school and get mad and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
But to be involved, they need to know what the curriculum is. When my children were in school and I would go to parent-teacher conference, they would say, well, your child has an A, your child has a B. I'm not really interested in their grade, so to speak. What are they learning?
Yes.
Don't tell me you got an A in U.S. history. I want to know, what are they learning? What's the content right now? Parents need to get involved and find out what their children are learning. Then at the same time, they need to have some expectations from the school as to the teaching, but also they got to be involved.
Absolutely.
When you talk about reading, a child is pretty much, again, getting back to that word I said earlier, exposure.
Exposure.
If I'm not exposed to people reading at home, I'm not going to read.
Exposure.
You know, if I'm just sitting around, we watching reality TV all the day, you know, I'm not trying to put down reality TV, but, you know, whatever that. But my thing is, if I'm just watching TV, that's what I say TV, period.
TV, period.
That's what I say, period. You know, so I got to be able to read. I love sports. My kids saw me watch football and ESPN or whatever, but at the same time, at some point, I got to be able to read. I got to be able to take them to a museum or the library or whatever. We had a Monday night was our library night, so we went to the library for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it was, because that was important. You know, not only you going to see it during the day, but as a family, I'm going to take the children to the library, the one on Grand River near Wesley Nichols. Back, so the parents, I mean. We got to expect a lot from the parents. Need to expect a lot from the school. They need to be involved, but at the same time, parents have to look at what can they do to supplement that education. You know, what can they do to help put their children in summer programs or whatever on a college campus? I love helping parents and families say that, you know what, it's April, we gonna or February or March or whatever. Early on in the year, we're going to help you plan to get your child on a college campus during the summer. So they can go and spend some time in a residence hall room and stay at a music camp or stay at a nursing camp. There's so many different things out there our children could do that we need to get involved in. And parents don't know. They say, well, maybe I don't know about it. Well, that's where calling this show or talking to Dr. Williams or myself, we can help you out, because that's what we need to do, help make sure our children are always ready to learn when they return to school that next September.
Absolutely. And we're talking about, you used that word exposure. I did. I was a keynote speaker for one of our programs that we participated in. And I'm going to give some kudos to Bridging the Gap.
Absolutely.
The Detroit Police Department. We've worked.
Name it Officer Tanya Rawls Owens.
Officer Tanya Rawls Owens. We love you. We know what you have done for the kids. But these are three words I want my listeners to be aware of. Exposure, opportunity breeds success. So if you expose your children to opportunities, success is not far away. But we have to be more aware of what our children are doing in the educational system, only because if God allows them to live, they won't be 14, 15, and 16 always, right? And I say that a lot.
That's the thing.
That's one of my favorite sayings.
You know?
So what kind of adults will they be?
Right. And you know, sometimes my wife would get on me because, you know, my wife is very nurturing. She loved when they were children, they were babies. And I did too. You know, not to say I was trying to be such a hard father or whatever, but I knew as being a black African-American male in this nation and knowing what I faced and wearing a suit or a tie almost daily, I knew that raising two black boys, yeah, I want to nurture you. Yeah, I want to have fun with you. Yeah, I want to have fun with you, my queen, my African-American daughter. But I know at some point, eventually, you got to leave this nest. And I got to get you ready. And the key thing is, we think about our children, they with us pretty much 18 years, you know?
Yes.
And 18 years is really short in a lifespan compared to a person that lives that may be 70, 80, 90 years old. And so I got to get them ready. So to me, those 18 years were preparation years. Yes, we want to have fun. Yes, we went on a few trips. Yes, we laughed and joked as a family. But I know part of my role was to be the person that said the heavy so far as saying, hey, you know what? Yeah, I got to get y'all ready. I got to get y'all ready for the future. So I know as parents, we have to do that.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. So as we continue down this conversation, I would also like to say, Mr. Winfrey, thank you for all your commitment to the young folks in the city of Detroit, because I know personally that you've gone above and beyond. Again, just to mention a few things: the coat drive, the Flint water drive, where we had two 18-wheelers that we escorted up to Flint when they were in their crises with the water. Food drives, going to college, black college tours. I mean, career fairs, expos. And a lot of times we don't say thank you enough. And we want to acknowledge that on this show.
Well, I want to thank you also, and I appreciate you saying that and thanking me. But when you think about the coat drives we did to help young people, children to have coats and mittens and hats and all that, or the water we took up to Flint, those were partnerships with the Detroit Police Department.
Yes.
And you were involved in that with Henry Ford High School. And then when you talk about that career expo, for a few years we did that in conjunction with the Detroit Police Department and the UAW Ford.
UAW.
You know, we exposing kids to skilled trades and disposing them to careers in law enforcement. But our main thing is, if you think about the continuum of things we did throughout the year in the college fairs and so forth, we were exposing them to the colleges. We're exposing them to skilled trades. We're exposing them to careers from the Detroit Police Department to the Wayne County Sheriffs, you name it. I don't want a child to become 25 years old and say, you know, I don't know. I didn't know. Well, we did that. We had you going to the colleges, meeting Michigan State and the Western and so forth individuals, to meeting people that could put you to work at a police academy right after high school. So we that's what we did, and we did that together. I love, again, as I said earlier in the show, helping our young people, because the thing is, and this is my prime example, and just give me a moment.
Okay, go ahead.
When I think about the times God has allowed me to sit on graduation stages at Shane Park, the Opera House, the Music Hall, Orchestra Hall, Cobo, Fox Theater, whether I was a keynote speaker, giving remarks, or just to be there to be on the dais or whatever, you know, we sit up on the stage and look at that young people.
Yes.
And I see them march in, you know, and pomp and circumstance, and the parents are cheering, and the uncles and aunties and cousins, everybody's there. I love high school graduation. It's one of the most exciting things. But after all the keynote speeches, after all the principal and the valedictorian and all those speeches and all that, almost every graduation, the same thing happens. They go up the right-hand side of the stage, little sheet of paper, it has their name on it. They give it to the announcer. They read the name. Depending on the popularity of the student, the crowd cheers, the parents cheer, whatever. Yes. They walk about 40 feet or so. They put something in that child's hand that says pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, first grade through 12th grade is over. It's over. Then they keep walking, and then when they come down the opposite side of the stage, and I think about every time I see a young person do that, if they don't have some kind of plan for life, life is going to give them one.
Yes.
Life will tell you if they don't have a plan for life, some kind of plan.
Some type of plan.
You know, their plan may change, but if they don't have some kind of plan, life is going to give them one. Life will eventually, you will find out, why am I living in this house? Why am I driving this car? Why am I making this certain salary? What? Because it happens. So my thing is, as I sit there on that stage, my thing is for help me to say that, how can I help make sure that student is prepared for the rest of their life? Because I've noticed, I've been to literally probably hundreds of graduations. I've never seen a student go back the other way to say, you know what? I can't do this. Right. I ain't ready. They keep moving forward. Whether they're ready or not, they keep moving forward. They get that diploma and they walk down the stage. They go home. They have probably some kind of party, or the parents take them to dinner. You know how we do for graduations. But the key thing, and I found out when I graduated from Cass Tech High School, and because all these things I talk about, this is personal. When I woke up that next morning, I realized that was the first day of the rest of my life. As much as I put down Cass, I'm tired of going to school. The lunch is not good, or whatever, and also the good times I had there.
Absolutely,
it was over. I could not go back. It's over. Once they put that in your hand, it's over. You can't go back and say, you know what, let me start all over. I want to have more fun. It's over. So my thing is, that was the first day of the rest of my life, and it helped me to say, you know what, now I got to take my life by the handles and do what I have to do.
Absolutely. And you know what I'm going to say, because we're coming to a close here. So we're talking about the state of urban education. I know we've got into some other aspects, but the state of urban education is very important right now. I think that we're fragile. Our children should be smarter than what we see on a test score. But we all have to work together as a community. What we have to do, one of the things moving forward, we have to make sure, and you said this earlier in the show, that we understand as parents, as community leaders, that we know what our children are learning. We know what is facing them in the future in terms of skill sets that they need. We know that we are in a digital age, high technology, that's not going to change. But we have to hold those accountable, that we are paying these tax dollars to, right? We have to make sure that our children get the same type of education that they're getting out in the suburbs. And I'm not saying that we're not getting a great education in the city, but we can do better. And I'm going to say at this time, as we get ready to close, I thank you so much, Mr. Winfrey, for your insight on this topic. Thank you for joining Men, Family, and Education Under Fire. And one of the things I'm going to say, continue to do what you're doing in the community. We need you.
Well, thank you. And if I could just say one thing, you said something that really sparked me. Our children are smart.
They're smart.
They are smart. I've seen them do some things. I think that sometimes they just, it's like a smartness that's under a blanket, you know, and so to speak, it's covered up. But these kids are smart. We know what they can do. I've seen young people when they were selling drugs, they knew how to count it, they knew how to weigh it, they knew how to cut crack, they know how to do all kinds of stuff. These kids are smart. We need to stop telling them as parents they're dumb, they're failing, they're nothing, and all that. So I'm saying, parents, let's do our jobs.
Let's do our job. And thank you, listeners. Stay tuned. Our upcoming show, we're going to talk about, we're coming up on the 50th anniversary of what some people call the rebellion or the riot of Detroit. We're going to talk about that. That is key. I was a young lad in Detroit. I remember that. That's going to be hot for us. But thank you so much for my listeners. And I want to let you know we love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Stay tuned to On The Go Radio.